Sixth trumpet continued. We started, a couple of weeks kind of looking at the sixth trumpet. Last week we did a course correction because I, came to kind of see things from a different perspective. And I was reading some things about, read a lot of different things. One of them was on, what to do, what are some things you can do if you get stuck in life. And one of them, it says, and these are some of the things you read when you have to take those psychology classes and all that. One of them says, if you find yourself stuck or stuck in a rut or whatever, is, don't keep doing the same thing the same way, expect different results. And look at things from a different perspective and all that. So anyway, that's kind of what we're doing in the study here. That's all right, dude. I hope if anybody that's watching the video, I hope they can see the dogs. What they're hearing. They just hear the dogs. Some big good dog fight going on in there.
She's just trying to provide some entertainment.
So we're going to go ahead and look at some more of the things that are going on in the sixth trumpet. Is we're looking at these things in categories, not just dividing them up in chapters, because the chapters don't always follow the groupings of people, places, things, issues, and events that are going on, especially in prophetic stuff. So from here on out, we're going to kind of look at this from a little different perspective in the groupings of things that come under certain categories. There's the three, let's see if I've got, well, there's the three, the seven seals, and then the seven trumpets, and then there's the seven bowl judgments. We haven't got to the seven bowl judgments yet. But anyway, in the sixth trumpet, we've already talked about the scorpion, locust, and the 200,000 horseman army with lion heads and serpent tails. And so now we're going to take a look at the rest of the strange things that appear and happen during the sounding of the sixth trumpet. And the angel proclaimed, after the fourth trumpet, that there woe to the inhabitants of the earth for the, three trumpets that are yet to sound, the three woes, which means grief and misery and so on like that. So the sixth trumpet is the second of those, and of course the seventh trumpet will be the third and last of the woes, and under the seventh trumpet then will come in those bowl judgments, and we'll look at all that. So chart here, and this kind of gives a pretty good sort of a cartoon thing of what happens during the sixth trumpet. It actually, like we talked about, it spans parts of 3 chapters, 9 through, 9, 10, and 11. We got the 4 angels released in the, Euphrates River, and this monster army of horses with heads like lions and tails like serpents come out, and they kill 1/3 of the remaining people on the earth. And one of the things we'll look at today is the Gentiles trample the holy city for 42 months, and the 2 witnesses that prophesy for 1,260 days, so on like that. And this guy, we're going to take a look at him, this mighty angel and so forth, the little scroll that John eats and all that. So let's go ahead and look at our scriptures. Starting in verse 10, chapter 1, he says, I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. He had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot on the earth, and cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. So, we got this guy, and from the description that John gives, I would say this is a pretty good artist's, rendering of this mighty angel. You've got the rainbow around his head there, and feet like pillars of fire, and he's 1 foot standing on the land and the other foot on the sea. We can assume that's, the land is the land of Israel, and the sea is the Mediterranean there. Since these things focus around Jerusalem and around the land of Israel. He's not seeing this happen in New Jersey, so it's in Israel, and the Mediterranean and so forth. And this mighty angel that came down from heaven, and he's standing here, has this small scroll in his hand, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And he cries out with a loud voice. We don't know what he says. John doesn't tell us what he said. If he just cried out some kind of like a specific proclamation or what, we don't know. And then we have over here the 7 lightning bolts, and I guess those could represent the 7 thunders, because unless there's something going on there, something else going on up there with those thunders, then what we know of normal thunder, what has to happen before you have thunder? You have to have lightning, right? So a lightning strike causes thunder. So we can assume that with these 7 thunders, there's some lightning strikes going on to create these thunders. So this is what we find. We're looking at this guy, and there's a lot here. I mean, I'm sure that there's, in all of this symbolism, there's a lot of meaning there. I don't know what any of it means. We could kind of speculate, but I'm going to tell you, out of all of the stuff that I've read about prophecy and and all this, there's so much screwball stuff out there. Searching on the internet, stuff you read in magazines and whatnot, that I don't know. I'm just going to say, where I don't know what it means, I'm just going to say I don't know what it means. That and move on.
Well, something I was reading, it said standing on the water and the land sort of symbolized that it was the whole world, the whole nation.
Well, yeah, I would.
You're reading things into stuff because it's really not there.
Yeah. I mean, you can see that, you can understand that viewpoint, but it's one of those things that if it's not there, let's not read stuff in that's not there. And boy, reading through all this stuff in Revelation with all of this symbolism and all of these crazy monstrous beasts and all of this stuff, it's very easy to go in there and try to assign some meanings to that stuff or read stuff in there. It's just not there, So, if it's not there, just leave it and look at the pictures and turn the pages. So, this is one thing I wondered about. He says, when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write and heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered and write them not. This is confusing to me because the 7 thunders, I would like to know what and who those are. Because, they can obviously speak. They say something. And I was thinking about it today, and I thought, what 7 things would those thunders say? What 7 things could they say that would fit in with what John's observing going on right here? I don't know. I couldn't think. I tried to think back through all of stuff in Moses and the law and the cycles of judgment and the stuff in Deuteronomy and I don't know. We're not told. John was even told, don't say anything about what these thunders, whatever it was they said. He was going to write it down, and of the same voice, we can assume that it's the Lord's voice, the voice that he heard coming out from the midst of the throne and so forth, told him not to write it down. I think back in Daniel, there were some things that he heard, and he was told, look, this is just seal this up. It's for the time of the end and so forth. So anyway, we don't know. We don't know what the 7 thunders said. I know you need to be careful. It's like not reading things in. You got to be careful assuming things. But I would assume that whatever it was that was uttered there by these 7 thunders are things that God has held in reserve and will be revealed in that end time to like through the two witnesses. They're going to know what that said, or somebody will know. It will have some significance in the future when it's when it's time to come out. When God's ready, whatever that was will be revealed at the right place and the right time.
Being seven thunders, though, you would think only John would be the one to hear them, because possibly he'd be the one to interpret them or whatever. I mean, if thunders, you think everybody would do it.
Yeah. The only, and I kept thinking and looking for, is there any biblical precedent here for this? The closest thing I could think of and come up with was, if you remember, there was a time when, and I'd have to look it up, I don't even remember which gospel account it was in. I think it was in John's gospel, where Jesus had prayed and he said, Father, glorify thy name. And I'm nearly sure it was John, same John that wrote this, and he said, and a voice came from heaven that said, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. And in the narrative there, it says that obviously some of them understood what was said, but the other people standing around, I'm assuming those that weren't believers in Jesus as a Messiah, they thought it thundered. They made the statement, well, it thundered, and maybe out of a clear blue sky. That's why it seemed remarkable to them. They couldn't figure out, why did it thunder? There's no clouds in the sky. So,
kind of the same thing with Paul's experience, the people with him saw the light where they didn't hear it.
Yeah.
They knew what was going on.
Yeah. Right. The people that were with him on the road to Damascus. And he says they heard I think in one account of that, he states that the people that were with him heard the voice, but they didn't see anything. And they weren't blinded like he was by the bright light. There's no indication that they heard and understood everything that Paul heard and understood. Maybe they could have been something like this. I don't know. But anyway, we can I guess safely assume that these thunders uttering their voices, this is maybe a manifestation of the Spirit of God speaking. We don't know. But anyway, one of those agents of God we see here, and kind of what's going on here. So John heard this, but he was told not to write it down. We move on. Verse 5. The angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer. Now this is interesting, because this is one of the places in Revelation. If you remember, we talked about this way back when we started this prophecy study, but we kind of did a quick tie-in about things in Genesis and things in Revelation. And here's one of the proclamations of God as Creator here in Revelation. And it's one of the things that they want to make absolutely clear, these angels in their proclamations, that God is the Creator of heaven and earth and everything that's in heaven and earth. He's the Creator, and they belong to Him. So we want to. One time I read through Revelation just to see how many references there were in the book to God as Creator, and there are quite a few in there. So they want to make that clear. So anyway, this mighty angel makes this proclamation, and that there should be time no longer. Now, there's kind of one school of thought that this means that, time comes to a stop. But we know that's not true, because there are too many events beyond this that have to happen in a chronological order. So, but the time no longer means that the stuff of the sixth trumpet are about finished, and when the seventh trumpet blows, those 7 vial judgments are going to come in rapid succession, and everything is going to wrap up. And God is going to finish up His business and the things that He intends to do. So there'll be time no longer. Time is up. Time for it all to draw to a close and come to an end. So, but then this is, well, I guess the continuing proclamation there. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, and that doesn't actually happen until the next chapter, chapter 11, verse 15, is the 7th angel sound. The mystery of God should be finished, as He hath declared to His servants the prophets. Now, I thought about what's the mystery of God? Well, in a nutshell, it's this. And I put this in. I didn't put it in the PowerPoint, but I put it in the notes. And we'll see some of the details over there, starting in chapter 11, at the opening of the blowing of the 7th trumpet. And it details some of the things that are going to happen. And those things are part of the mystery of God. But basically, in a nutshell, God has revealed to His prophets His overall plan and purpose. And first of all, was through Abraham, He would raise up the nation of Israel as a holy nation of kings and priests, as His representatives in the world. And through them, the Savior would come. They would be His representatives to the Gentile nations and so forth. They would eventually occupy His land, what we call the Holy Land, because it's set apart. God said He had set apart that land for them, that He would come down and dwell with them, dwell with His people in His creation in that land. And that's what we're going to see happen in the millennial reign, and then in the new heaven and new earth. But that was the plan originally for Israel. Through them, He would reclaim His creation from the enemy, Satan, who usurped it. After Adam sinned and so on, Satan made the grab, and he grabbed the dominion of the earth, took something that wasn't his, and wants to claim the earth for his own, and God's very throne too, if possible. Part of the mystery of God is that through the power of His mercy and grace, that He would provide redemption for fallen mankind through His Son. And that also through His Son, through working with His grace, He would raise up sons and daughters who would live with Him in His creation. And all of this, the creation, His people, and the redeemed earth, all these things would serve as an inheritance for His Son. Because remember this, God's apparently, and I believe this to be true, God's original plan in creating the heavens and the earth and everything in creation was that He was going to create something that would be an inheritance for His Son. And through His working out of His plan and purpose through the whole history of His Word and the things that He has done, that's what we see happening. We see God putting these things together, and He is going to redeem everything as and for an inheritance for His Son. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the mystery of God is. And God will judge the world in righteousness through Jesus Christ, His Son, and the righteousness of God will rule for eternity. So that's kind of the mystery of God and what He's going to do. That's His plan and purpose. And there are other aspects of that and things that I believe God hasn't revealed yet, but that He will reveal. But anyway, whatever all is contained in the mystery of God, it's going to be wrapped up and finished coming into the days of the blowing of the seventh angel. He goes on to say, the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again, and said, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel, which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. Let me see, there's a verse here I need to... let me go ahead and read this to you. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up. It was in my mouth sweet as honey, and as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. So there's the angel has this little book, we could say a scroll. To them, that's what a book was, in his hand. John went and, let me have the book, and he was told to eat it, and so on. You read the rest of the details here. What was written in the little book, we don't know specifically, but we can assume, since John is given this long series of prophecies, and he's told right here what's going to happen with him, you must go and prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. Now, this is one statement that's made to John that leads some people to believe that John received this revelation earlier in his life than what is kind of commonly thought. It's kind of commonly thought this was like 90 A.D. John was a real old man, decrepit old man out there on the island of Patmos, and and so on when he received this. Well, I'm not sure that could be if he's going to have time in his life, because he wouldn't have been told he was going to do this if he didn't. Now, we don't really have any historical accounts of what happened to John after he got off the island of Patmos. There's folklore and there's stories and so on, traditions like that. But as far as accurate historical accounts, nobody really knows. But here's one thing we can be pretty sure about. He prophesied to many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. And in his area where he was, in Asia Minor there, in the world in that day, I don't know that there could have been a better place to, have contact with these different groups of people and so on like that, especially in that, Greco-Roman Mediterranean world. A lot of travel and a lot of access to different cultures and different things like that. So anyway, what did the book say? We don't know. Whatever was in it, it was a prophecy that John needed to have something specific to then go and talk to these peoples and nations and tongues and kings. That's what was in the little book, and he, ate it, and it was sweet as honey and bitter in his belly and so forth. So the prophet Ezekiel had a similar experience. It's interesting the parallels between what happened with Ezekiel and what happened with John. A lot of interesting parallels there. Yeah, with Daniel too, but this happened to Ezekiel. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat that I give thee. When I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein, and he spread it before me, and it was written within and without. And there was written therein lamentations and mourning and woe. Now, that's the same thing John's talking about. So it could be that the little book that John was given by the mighty angel standing there with one foot on the land and one on the sea may have contained the same thing, lamentations and mourning and woe, because that's what John's talking about there with all the blowing of these trumpets. That's what's happening, so very well could be. We never know. It might have been the second copy it might have said the exact same thing that Ezekiel's little book said. We don't know. I guess we can ask him down the road. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and go speak unto the house of Israel. Here's one of the examples of Ezekiel being addressed as Son of Man. You remember way back when we talked about that? I still haven't come to any answers on that. There are three people in the Bible referred to as Son of Man: Ezekiel, Daniel, and Jesus. And why that is, I don't know. I've dug through there and tried to find some common, common thread to connect that, and I haven't found it. So if any of you find it, let me know. If you figure out why were these three referred to as Son of Man? I don't know. But anyway. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat the roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did I eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness, just like John's roll that he ate. And I guess with him saying a roll, we are assuming, since he said it's written on the inside and backside, we are assuming like a scripture roll, not like a bread roll. Here's the roll, eat it. Then, back to Revelation, John's next description. There was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and then them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. 42 months, that's 3.5 years. Now, why? Well, we'll read that. Okay. 3.5 years, we know, is half of the 70th week. We can see here that the Gentile nations will overrun Jerusalem for that period of time. Now, I'm thinking that represents the last half of that 7 years. From the point in time when the Antichrist sets himself up in the temple to be worshipped in Jerusalem, at the midpoint of the 70th week, that's 7 years. And because of that, all of the judgments begin to start and so forth. And that begins the 42 months that the Gentiles are just going to run roughshod over Jerusalem and so on. We know that it's at that point Jesus told the believing remnant, he said, look, when you see this happen, just run. Drop what you're doing and run. Run for the hills. Get out of town and run. So, devastating things are going to happen there. The Gentiles will trample the city. There are a lot of prophecies that go into great detail describing that again.
Why are they always asked to measure?
Okay. I heard a pretty good explanation about that, and I think it's pretty valid. It's the most valid explanation that I know of. And they said that measuring something indicates ownership. God's having measured out what is His, because it sets a boundary, and it accomplishes some other things. It's like a deed or property. I mean, if you're going to sell a property, the one thing that has to be done, it has to be measured off, and boundaries set and all those kind of things. So, and because this statement, the court outside of the temple leave it out and don't measure it because it's given unto the Gentiles, that shows that at this particular time, that part of what's going on, that's not part of God's deal. That's not part of His. But the temple and the altar and the other things, that's His. He's having that measured out and setting boundaries for that. This is mine, nobody touches this. The Gentiles can have that out there. They're going to be allowed to have that for 42 months. So now there may be other reasons for the measurements and things, but I think that explanation has some valid points. It makes some sense. So like I say, if any of you, if you run across anything, read something about that. Make sure you mention it.
This also says, for it is given unto the Gentiles. So that's proof that there are Gentiles in Jerusalem, I guess.
Yeah, there will be, at that time, there will be Gentiles, and this is specifically unbelieving Gentiles that are just, trampling the city, and it's, by this point, it is full-on war against Israel, and the forces of Antichrist and just the human armies and so forth. They want to wipe Israel out, and there's full-on assault against them by this point. And so they've already desecrated the temple, maybe even torn it down by this time, and just desecrated the whole city with idolatry and everything they could to trample it underfoot. And also part of Satan's plan in this, which he has always had, this part of his campaign to desecrate the land is to bring in idols and the sacrifice to devils and all those kind of things to desecrate the land, because he knows that if he could desecrate the land, it cannot be basically he's doing that to try to prevent God from being able to set that up as his place where he dwells with his holy people. And the land of Israel is to desecrate it so that the kingdom can't come in, because by this time, the proclamation going out from, the angels flying through heaven and all that, is that the kingdom is coming, and the day of God's, the great and terrible day of his wrath is at hand. That's what the message will be. And all these people are going to know it. They're going to know it, but they're going to think if they can trample the city underfoot, and if they can desecrate it, the kingdom can't come in. And God can't complete his plan. His mystery cannot be completed. But they're wrong. So that's that's another area for us to kind of be aware and look for additional answers to that. Because I think there's probably other reasons, additional reasons for the measuring that we see. It's over in Ezekiel chapter 40, the same thing happened. Angel came down there and had a rod and measured the whole. He gives like 3 chapters. He goes into this great detail about measuring every gate and every portal and every window and the stairs and all the buildings and every wall and on and on and on. Every great detail about measuring this whole place. And we'll find the same thing happen when we get over like chapter 20, 21, where it's talk about the new heaven and the new earth. It doesn't go into great detail, but it also gives measurements. They measure everything. And it may be because one of the things that will be evident, I think, is how precise God is in all things. And there must be a time in these measurements. There's something there about also not just a space factor, but a time factor as well. Because he says, the court which is without the temple, leave it out and measure it not. It's given to the Gentiles, but the time factor is they'll tread it under 40 and 2 months. So maybe the measurements have a kind of a time factor in there too. I don't know. Good question. Okay. This is a pretty good point. These things that we're seeing happen with the Gentiles treading the city under the foot, and things going on with the apostate nation of Israel, these things are another fulfillment of the prophecy in Psalm 2. We've referred to this a lot, especially this happened at Christ's crucifixion. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? Remember, the phrase, the heathen, that's unbelieving Gentiles, because that's how they looked at it. They lumped all the unbelieving Gentiles, pagan Gentiles, into one heap, the heathen. That was them. But then we find the phrase, the people, that's talking about Israel. So we can see, why do the pagan Gentiles and unbelieving Israel imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together. So, kings of the earth, that's the heathen Gentiles, and the rulers, that's talking about the rulers of Israel. So here we find again, the Gentiles and Israel counseling together, and also the kings of the earth and the rulers counseling together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. This is the prophecy that was fulfilled at Christ's crucifixion. This was why Peter and all the apostles thought that judgment was coming on. They expected the great and terrible day of the Lord's wrath, because they knew that the rulers of Israel and the kings of the earth, which Rome was that authority at that time, they knew that they had fulfilled this prophecy against Christ, against the Lord's anointed. And so they were expecting the great and terrible day of the Lord's wrath. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. This may be those seven thunders uttering right there, the Lord speaking in his wrath. It is, yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and look what happens here. And I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possessions. This ties into the mystery of God. This is the things that God proclaimed he would do. All of this stuff we're seeing in Revelation, all the details and monsters and all this stuff, it's the carrying out of this messianic prophecy here in Psalm 2. The uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. And that's what this verse, a lot of this is what we're seeing, and all these devastating things that are coming on those kings of the earth and the apostate Israel. It's in fulfillment of this prophetic psalm right here. Be wise now, therefore, ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. And blessed are all they that put their trust in him. So, the believing remnant that are alive during that time, they're going to read this psalm, and they're going to get strength from it, but they're going to know exactly what's going on. They're going to know that this is being fulfilled. And so anyway, this is one of those prophetic scriptures that, we need to understand that all this stuff we're seeing in Revelation is the fulfillment of this right here, this messianic psalm. So, back to Revelation. He says, and I will give this, change of subject, going to the two witnesses. I'll give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now, here we have a time factor of 1,260 days. Here again, that's 3.5 years. Same as 42 months. Why the different delineations of the same time period are used, I don't know. Over in Daniel, it kind of does the same thing. Time, times, and half a time. 42 months. 1,260 days. Or, over in Daniel chapter 12, he talks about 1,290 days. And then 1,335 days. So there's some other things going on there. But anyway, the two witnesses. And they'll prophesy this particular period of time. Now, until I started studying back through Revelation here for this study, I was kind of always, or for a long time, of the opinion that the two witnesses began their ministry at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. Well, and I had a lot of reasons why I believe that to be true. I've changed my mind on that because these two witnesses show up and they come on the scene after what has happened, the blowing of the sixth trumpet. And that's kind of, way down the timeline, apparently. So if that's the case, they can't show up at the first half of the tribulation. And here's another thing too. Just because they will operate for 1,260 days doesn't mean that it has to be exactly the first or second half. It could be somewhere, in there somewhere. They could have this 3.5 year period of time that they prophesy. After reading back through this, I think now that their ministry is in the second half of the tribulation. And these things that we'll look at that happen to them, I think are going to happen towards the end. But anyway, here again, a lot of debate over this, and who the two witnesses are and all that kind of stuff. This is a pretty good picture. We have this going on in the prophecy back in Zechariah. He saw, the two olive trees. In fact, I think So, who are the two witnesses? We don't know. Is it Elijah and Moses? Is it Elijah and Enoch? Maybe it's not any of them. Maybe it's not any Bible character that's going to be, brought back onto the scene. Maybe it's just two regular people that God has, raised up for that particular time, and when it's time for them to begin their ministry, they'll be given, revelation that they need, and they'll start their... We don't know. We don't know who it is. There's good reason to believe it's Elijah and Moses. Pretty good reason to believe it's Elijah and Enoch. There's some valid reasons to believe it's not any of those. It's some two other people completely. But I think probably if I had to say who I thought the two witnesses would be, I'd probably have to go with Elijah and Moses. And I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why. One of the main reasons. And I've changed my mind on this too. I used to think Enoch and Elijah for two reasons. Because neither one of them died. They were both taken up alive off of the earth. Both of them had a prophetic message that would fit the time and the ministry of the two witnesses. Especially, Enoch did. The only recorded words of Enoch we have in the Bible are over there in Jude, where he quotes him saying, "Behold, the Lord is coming with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment on the ungodly." Well, if that's not a message for, the end-time tribulation, I don't know what would be. Plus, those two men are the only two that we know of, recorded in the Bible, that never died. Enoch was taken off the earth alive, and so was Elijah. So that's good reason to believe that they too are the two witnesses. Good reason to believe that it's Elijah and Moses is because if you remember back in Matthew chapter 17 on the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah appeared to Jesus talking with him. And I've wondered if the reason Moses and Elijah showed up there is, because at that point in time, Jesus was preparing for his crucifixion. And things were moving in the direction of that the kingdom was not going to come in because Israel had rejected their Messiah. And instead, the day of the Lord's wrath was going to come in. So I'm wondering, could it be that when Moses and Elijah appeared there on the Mount of Transfiguration, they were there to start their ministry as the two witnesses? And one of the reasons Jesus met them there was to, talk to them. Said, no, it's not time yet. And, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing out some speculation there. Again, which I don't really like to do. I don't like to speculate or assume things. But anyway, just saying it could be. But those two appeared to Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. So that's kind of a reason to think they may be the two witnesses. But who they are doesn't really matter. It's more about their ministry and what they say. As far as their prophetic ministry witness, we don't have a lot of detailed indication about what they say. But we know from the prophets and what we've seen here already kind of what some of the things they're going to talk about. But John had, when they do show up, they're going to prophesy against God's enemies, and they're going to talk about further coming judgments. You know, they just they tell the truth, and they're not going to be politically correct about it either. Another reason to believe Elijah, at least, is one of the two witnesses, because there are several clear statements made about Elijah that he will return, he will restore the hearts, or return the hearts of the children to the fathers, and the fathers to the children. In a statement Jesus made about Elijah, he said, it's true, Elijah will come first and will restore all things. So, you know, the reason to believe at least one of the witnesses will be Elijah. So these are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. Now, assuming John knew what that meant, Zechariah saw a vision of these two witnesses in different form. Over there in chapter 4, he said unto me, what seest thou? And I said, I've looked, and behold, a candlestick all of gold. And remember, when they're talking about a candlestick, they mean like a menorah, with a bowl upon the top of it, and 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps which are upon the top thereof. And 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof. So I answered and spake unto the angel that talked with me, saying, what are these, my Lord? Now, I suppose we can assume that the flowing oil kind of represents the Spirit of God flowing, you know, from him to whatever receptacles and burning lamps and so on that we have there. Then answered I and said unto him, what are these 2 olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side thereof? And I answered again and said unto him, what be these 2 olive branches which through the 2 golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? And he answered me and said, knowest thou not what these be? And I said, no, my Lord. Wouldn't be asking if I knew what they were. Then said he, these are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. So these are the 2 witnesses. That's what we're told over in Revelation. We're referred back to this. So the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. Well, I don't know about you, but that doesn't give me a whole lot more information. I don't know who that's talking about. I'm sure that if we search the Scriptures, the answer is there somewhere. So we'll just have to continue to search the Scriptures, figure out who are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. Which really, you know, the Lord of the whole earth, that would be the Lord Jesus Christ, because he, you know, his inheritance and so on. So, still not sure who the 2 witnesses are, but we can see what they do. If any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. If any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. So now, I'm thinking, all right, picture in your mind, in Jerusalem, when these 2 witnesses begin their ministry, and you know, they're not going to have to go up to anybody and explain to anybody who they are. It's going to be obvious who they are. Bam! These are like 2 bona fide Old Testament prophets that are here now, and they could do the stuff that the Old Testament prophets could do. And all of Israel's enemies are going to, in great fear, suddenly and immediately and viciously attack, especially try to attack these 2. So, knowing what we know about how things go in the Middle East, when those people get excited, it's not like 4 or 5 of them, it's like 500,000 of them all at once. Imagine this mad rush of fanatical Muslims at these guys, and just, you know, burning fire out of their mouth and lay low masses of their enemies before them. This is something nobody's ever seen happen before. Great power they're going to have. And once they do that, they'll stop. Okay, now, where was I? Oh, yeah. And they're going to continue to prophesy. And so, you know, they'll also be able to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, which is another thing that points to Elijah. Have power over waters to turn them to blood. Who was able to do that? Moses, back in, you know, with Pharaoh and all that. And to smite the earth with all plagues. Here again, kind of points back to Moses. He's the one that did that back in Egypt. As often as they will. So they're going to have a lot of leeway within that 3.5 years to back up what they say. And nobody is going to be able to stop them or slow them down or hurt them or anything. They're just going to have full, power to do what they want to as God's representatives. And now, one of the things about this is that nobody is going to be able to say, when it all comes down to the end of it and the judgments and all that kind of stuff, nobody's going to be able to say that, well, God didn't try to warn us about all this coming judgment. Yes, He did. Multiple ways He tried to warn everybody. So.
Who has been anointed other than the Lord Jesus? He's anointed by Mary, but who else has been anointed?
Well, the kings were anointed. David was anointed. Solomon was, all the kings, even Saul was anointed by Samuel the prophet. Let's see. I was trying to think, who could that be? Who could that be? Who could the two anointed ones, who could they be? And would it be an anointing by men, by the prophets, or is it some special anointing, by God, or anointing by the Holy Spirit? And I tried to think, who would that be? I couldn't think of anybody. I don't know. I cannot come up with any two people that would fit that, the two anointed ones. I don't know. It's one of those areas for further study.
Well, the kings were actually anointed before they took over.
Yeah.
Jesus was anointed actually before his death.
Yeah.
So it makes you think when it says anointed, if that has anything to do with it.
Yeah. It could. It could be. Sure could be. I don't know. So we'll.
But Elijah wasn't anointed, was he?
I don't. No. He just kind of appears all of a sudden.
Yeah.
God gives him his revelation. And
Moses really wasn't either, was he?
Moses wasn't.
Told?
No, because they only. Now here's one thing. The priests were anointed. So it might be to look at somebody in the priesthood that was, because the priests, the high priests especially, were anointed to their office. In fact, there was a special oil they mixed up just specifically for the priests to anoint them. Psalm 133, I think, talks about that. Aaron anointed with the oil, and it ran down through his beard and the fragrance and all those things. So it could have something to do with somebody in the priesthood. These two anointed ones, really, if you think about it, with these being Jewish witnesses, prophets, prophesying mainly to Israel, but affecting Gentiles too. It could be some two people that were anointed as priests. They could be in the priest or high priestly class, there. So it sure could be. That would fit. That would make sense. But I don't know who. I don't know who that would be. One of the things about in Zechariah, I have to read back through there, but there's a lot of talk about Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest and so on like that. So I don't know. It would be an area of study. Maybe I believe the answers are there. The answers are there in Scripture. When we pray and search the Scriptures, God will give us answers. And that may be years down the road when that answer comes. Have you ever had one of those things where, you're something you may have even forgotten about, you're reading through the Bible or you're studying something or listening to somebody, and all of a sudden there it is. That's the answer that I wondered about way back there. That answers that question. So, anyway, they're going to have a lot of power, and this is what they're going to do. When they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit. Now I'm going to assume that this is the beast over there in chapter 13, verse 11, where John says, I saw a beast come up out of the earth. And it basically was the false prophet and so forth. I'm thinking that's the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit. Shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So, while this kind of leaves us with some additional questions, it does tell us some things about the spiritual condition of Jerusalem at the time. And this is how God looks at Jerusalem because of the apostate state of Israel at the time. That they have made this deal with the devil and almost wholesale, except for that believing remnant that is by this time run out into the hills and out in the desert to where they're surviving out there. But the rest have gone completely over to, the Babylonian system and the mark of the beast and all that. So this is how God looks at them, as corrupted Sodom and, idolatrous as Egypt. And makes no mistake about it, because we know there's only one city where the Lord was crucified. That's Jerusalem. So we know where it's talking about. So anyway, this beast will be given the power to overcome the two witnesses and kill them. There's no indication that they'll be beheaded or anything like that. Probably stoned to death. I would assume that they'll probably be stoned to death. Maybe they'd be shot or something. We don't know these days. But anyway, they won't be, mangled or mutilated or anything, apparently. But they'll be killed and their bodies left lying in the street there in Jerusalem. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half. Now, maybe this is one reason why John was told that, look, you're still going to have to prophesy to peoples and kindreds and tongues and nations. And what do you think part of what he's going to prophesy to them would be? This right here, what we're reading. And remember, they expected all this to take place in their lifetime. So nobody could say, oh, nobody ever told us about this, this was going to happen. John did. He went to these, peoples and he told them exactly these things. But anyway, whenever this does happen, all the people will see their dead bodies 3 days and a half and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put into graves. Now, this was always a puzzling thing to students of prophecy up until, 10, 15 years ago? And now, they think, how are all the people in the world going to see your dead bodies laying in the street? You can go to anywhere in the world and people have cell phones. You go out in the jungle, people live in mud huts and a satellite dish on top. We saw a Bedouin tent dwelling in Israel had a satellite dish out there. And
it looked kind of strange that they prophesied for 3.5 years. They laid there in the streets for 3.5 days.
Yeah.
But then it was 3 days before Christ was raised from the dead. So, there seems to be semblance all along.
There is. There's a continuity there, a symmetry in these things. Plus, we have to remember that in the ancient way of thinking, they believed that a person may not actually be completely dead until after 3 days. There's something about they believe that a person's spirit did not leave their body or completely leave their body until after 3 days. Like with Lazarus, when Jesus got there, it had been 4 days. Well, they were believers. They believed Jesus, had the power to do just pretty much anything. But for them, it was kind of absurd to even think of Lazarus rising from the dead because he'd been dead 4 days. Now, if you'd have been here yesterday, it would have been 2.5, or maybe even 3 days. Okay, yeah, we could understand that. Go ahead. But it's been 4 days. By now, corruption has set in, and so it was his spirit has departed, and all that. So that's kind of what they believe. So the fact that with it being 3.5 days, besides the symmetry that we see and similarity with other times and things, there was also that they would have believed that these guys are dead. Their spirits have departed and they're not coming back. And more than likely, one of the reasons that they're going to leave their dead bodies laying out there in the street, not so much just to desecrate their bodies and not give them even the respect of a decent burial, but the fear of them resurrecting. And as afraid as they were of them when they were alive, if those prophets had resurrected, then they knew all bets are off. It's the end. There's no hope then. So I think there's something about, it's kind of like some primitive cultures believe that if a body is mutilated or scalped or parts of it cut off or whatever, then it can't go into the afterlife or whatever. It can't function in the afterlife and all that kind of stuff. So there's some of those kind of cultural beliefs incorporated here too in some of these things, or are very likely so.
Well,
but anyway.
And with them leaving them lying there, then when they saw them actually rise. And,
yeah.
There's no doubt, well, they stole their bodies or something,
Right. There's not going to be any question. Well, we buried them, but now their graves are empty. And no. They're right out there in the middle of the street, and everybody just dancing around. They've been dancing around these dead bodies for 3.5 days, rejoicing and sending presents and all this kind of stuff. Making merry. It's Merry Dead Witnesses Day. It's, then after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, kind of like, remember, all the way back in creation when it says he breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life and he became a living soul. So the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. So you can imagine, I can picture in my mind kind of like this wind, like a whirlwind, just, whips up the dust around these two witnesses, and when the dust clears, there they are standing there. They're standing up there and they're alive. Or it just maybe this, wind comes through and they're laying there and they start to move and they just, get up like that and stand up and look around. And boy, at that point, the party stops. I mean, you'd be able to hear a pin drop as everybody just looks and they can't believe it, that these two guys had been risen from the dead. And winding its way through all of the people's minds at that point is going to be the thought that, maybe we were wrong. Oh, it's not, it's too late. So then, they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. Now here's another similarity with Christ, that when he ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and so on. So same thing's going to happen to them. We can assume that just like for them, they are standing there 1 minute, and they just begin to rise into heaven, surrounded by a cloud, and they go on up completely out of sight into heaven. And so all of their enemies saw what happened, and they had to know at that point, we've been wrong, and probably the jig is up for them, and they knew and pretty much gone too far. Same hour, there was a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Now, this earthquake is one of, we've seen accounts of other earthquakes that seem to affect the whole world. This one is central to Jerusalem. It's there. And it literally decimates the city. It's what, the word decimate. We use the word decimate when something's just kind of almost wiped out. Well, decimate actually means for 1 out of 10 of something to be destroyed or taken away or killed. The term came about from Roman legions. If they lost a battle in a really, really messed up bad or almost to the point of like mutiny, their legion would be taken out and decimated. They would count down the line and like 9, 10, you die. Count another off 10, you die. So they would decimate. Every 10th one would be killed as punishment for their losing their battle or disobeying an order or whatever, leaving their post or whatever. So that's where the term decimate came from. So it's going to literally decimate the city, and 7,000 people are going to be killed. Now this is going to be a lot of people because by this time, remember, we've been through all of these, lion-headed horses with snake tails and killed 1/3 of the people and all that. So there aren't that many people left. Devastating earthquake there in Jerusalem and tear a lot of things down. And so they were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Now we don't know if that was a true change of heart among the people or just kind of a temporary realization that we have really messed up and we better try to appease God to try to, stop some of the destruction before it's all over. Don't know, but anyway, at least they were given a chance to, give glory to God and so on. In the where it says the 7,000 men, kind of a generic term for people, so it may have been, men and women too. All right, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. So it was all the first woe, that was the 5th trumpet, and those things that happened during then. The 6th trumpet was the second woe, and all this series of the scorpion, locust, the horsemen with the lion heads and snake tails, the mighty angel standing there proclaiming and the 7 thunders uttering, and John receiving the little book of prophecy, and he would go and prophesy to nations and tongues and kings and so forth. And then the 2 witnesses, their ministry and the things they would do, and they would be killed, raised from the dead and ascend to heaven, and then this terrible earthquake that would happen. All these things are incorporated in the blowing of the 6th trumpet. So next time we'll take a look at the next one, the 7th trumpet, and the things that are going to come about during then. And it'll probably take a couple of weeks to go over that, because there's quite a bit in that 7th trumpet. So anyway, anybody got anything to add or take away?
Elijah and Enoch being two that would possibly be ready. That's the conclusion I had come up with. But then, like I said a moment ago, when Lazarus died, because they did not die, they were just taken away. But Lazarus died and resurrected, but he lived on to be resurrected again. So
yeah,
Elijah and Enoch could die and be resurrected twice too.
Yeah. I mean, those people.
That was the whole of my theory.
Right, the people that Jesus raised from the dead, the people that Paul and Peter raised from the dead, they lived a few more years and then died again. They are not a normal natural death.
That blows my theory of being Elijah and Enoch because they didn't die.
Yeah, okay. But, all right, here, for it to be Enoch and Elijah, there would have to be some place where they have been physically preserved for, Enoch, 5,000 years, alive for 5,000. Now we know God could do that because they could just go in some timeless state where, they're taken off the earth and then bang, they're right back, and hardly any time has passed. But one thing about Elijah is we know that he has been alive since he was taken off the earth, because he appeared on the Mount of Transfiguration with Moses and talked with Jesus. So, he was there. So I don't know. I don't know. I've thought for a long time. I thought Enoch and Elijah, and I still think very well could be. So, but anyway,
it's just hard to put a definite.
Yeah. It's like a lot of this stuff, and you read through all of this stuff, prophetic stuff, and there's some people that, man, they nail all this stuff down. Boy, they've got it figured out, and this is it, and. A few years go by, and obviously they were wrong, and so a lot of this stuff is just, you really can't nail it down. It's kind of like we just sort of have to window shop at it, look at it as we go by, and get the basic gist of it, and what we don't understand and don't know, we just don't, just leave it and move on. But it's interesting. It's stuff we need to know the basics anyhow. All right, anything else? All right, well, everybody have a good week, and let's pray, and we'll do this. Lord, we thank you so much.